I think I mentioned last week the USDA planting report showing in the US how acreage is being reduced on corn. And we're seeing this around the world where acres are coming out of production or less fertilizer is being used, which means less food's being made. So everything that we predicted, I mean, this is a slow train, a Titanic into the iceberg that we're watching right now. And it's going to continue for 9 to 18 months. So, one of the questions that people are now asking, which I said, would become a really critical next step in this crisis, is how are we going to bridge the gap in calories? Where's the food going to come from? And how are we going to feed nations that are almost entirely dependent on imports that are running out of food or out of food? So I've mentioned this in the past. The whole world runs on a 90-day food supply, which means roughly 25% of the world's calories are in storage right now. But that's not the case uniformly. So some countries like Tunisia and Somalia, Ethiopia, have close to 0 calories in storage. Some countries like the United States are roughly 30-40% of our annual consumed calories are sitting in storage. China is a complete outlier. For years, China has been stockpiling food. And at this point, China has 150% of their annual consumption of food in storage. So they have supplies that if all food production and imports stopped in China, they would be able to feed their population for 1.5 years. That's an incredible supply of food. So as you look around the world to places like Sri Lanka and places like Somalia that are struggling to figure out how are we going to bridge this gap on calories that's about to hit us. Egypt's about 4 months of food, by the way, and Egypt is dwindling. They cannot get the food out of the Black Sea. So China is going to be one of the very few potential solutions for bridging the calorie gap over the next year. And I have a strong prediction and a strong belief that because of that, China will use it to maximal leverage. And we will see over the next year an incredible amount of leverage and power being accumulated by China because of transactions that they're going to start to enter into to bridge the calorie gap around the world. So in the Horn of Africa, for example, there has been this continuous presence of China trying to give themselves a military base, trying to take some influence over local media. And there's been this kind of push and pull with certain populations around whether or not we should kind of embrace China locally. And I think that, for example, the food crisis that we're seeing emerge in Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, Djibouti is going to be resolved by China. And China is going to end up gaining influence, gaining military presence, and establishing a more permanent foothold in the Horn of Africa because of the position that they're in of strength with all these calories and the need in these regions. And that's not just there. Sri Lanka, other parts of Southeast Asia, even Western Africa, Northern Africa, China's going to show up. And they're the only country that can show up. The UN, the World Food Program, they're going to do everything they can to shuffle calories around, change food supplies. But I do think that one of the things that everyone's going to be watching, and it's a slow roll. This isn't going to be some one big deal and everyone wakes up. Over the next year, while the US is, trying to do everything we can to maximally impose sanctions on Russia, China is slowly turning the crank around the world on the influence that they are going to gain because of this food crisis and the absolute, surplus that they have locally and the ability to export that surplus to support needs around the world. And it's not going to be free. It's